With Disney's live-action iteration of Snow White 2025 just around the corner and set and ready to release on March 21st of 2025, we already know that there's a lot of things going on right now with this actual movie that's been gaining so much backlash beyond expectations. We know that Disney doesn't quite know how to handle the situation right now based on the various comments that have been displayed on the two trailers that dropped by Disney, and it's only getting worse for Rachel Zegler. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So one thing about Rachel Zegler is that we already know that she's gone into damage control mode and double down mode as well about this actual movie. We already know as well that at the same exact time, we have a lot of those executives over at Disney really trying to save this movie's image as much as possible. That's exactly why they're trying to keep Rachel Zegler very quiet, actually lessening the amount of interviews that she will be doing for the press tour of Snow White. It's getting very ugly now when it comes to what's been going on behind the scenes and in the public eye in regards to the marketing campaign for Snow White. Let's jump into this, shall we? Now, one thing about Snow White 2025 is that we know that Bob Iger, the Disney CEO, he did in fact confirm that this is going to shift away from source material. In fact, this movie is going to be all about saving society and how it's going to focus on real-world issues there, and how it's also going to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is going to be another dumpster fire by Disney, and it could very well be the final nail in the coffin when it comes to Disney live-action remakes. However, on top of everything here, this is where it gets really interesting, is that with the entire media and the film industry now in serious financial trouble, one significant development going on now involves more to do with Rachel Zegler in regards to the drama surrounding Snow White 2025. Now, a crucial update to this entire situation is that, as it turns out, during reshoots, Rachel Zegler shot a scene with her co-star Andrew Burnap, who plays the so-called prince in the new film. There was a moment of outrage during the reshoots for a very important scene in which the prince saves Snow White from falling off a cliff into the woods that are on fire from the evil queen. This scene took roughly 10 takes to complete due to Rachel Zegler's incompetence, where she began to have personal issues with Andrew Burnap for acting too emotional during the scene that led to moments of outrage by Rachel Zegler, where she had to be taken off the set and started to blame Andrew Burnap for the extensive takes for this actual scene that required very high and emotional acting skills. Now, the scene, despite the multiple takes that were considered a disaster, according to test screeners that saw a certain cut of the film, the reason why Zegler was taken off the set when she was having issues with Andrew Burnap, as it turns out, has more to do with the fact that she had an issue with Disney moving along with their plan to have the prince saving Snow White from her own demise. This led to internal conflicts where Zegler was calling and demanding the Disney executives to delete the entire scene because she felt it was an embarrassment and broke the promises made that this would be a female-centric film where a woman would actually stand on her own without having to rely on a man. As of today, the scene still remains in the final cut despite the lackluster acting and for the sequence that was filmed and the fact that she actually was pulled off the set after having arguments with Andrew Burnap and blaming him for challenges, of course, surrounding the scene. Now, this in turn as well is exactly why director Mark Webb labeled Zegler as difficult to work with, while writer Greta Gerwig labeled her as an inspiration and energetic actress who shoots for the stars. Now, let me just say one thing about Greta Gerwig, guys, is that we already know that she is in full support of Rachel Zegler. She is one that really does love everything to do with DEI. And Greta Gerwig is what you would exactly call as another insufferable writer in Hollywood in the film industry. Not a big shocker there as to why Disney hired her. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have somebody like Mark Webb, who has a history of The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, which had also a divided fan base. You know, there were fans that did not like those films. There were also fans that loved those movies. But at the same exact time, like I say, Mark Webb found Rachel Zegler to be very difficult to work with based on her issues with Andrew Burnap. Now, this is exactly why you haven't really seen Andrew Burnap talking about this movie or standing side by side with Rachel Zegler, and there's more to it than just that. We'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. This is where it gets interesting, though, is that we have a moment where Rachel Zegler did not want a scene to be filmed, ultimately, where she would actually be saved by a man, because she was actually promised by Greta Gerwig, and hence promised by Disney, that such a thing would never happen in this actual movie. Things changed because of the large backlash, things changed because of just how terribly received this movie was actually, getting, based on the overall, public response, based on the feedback from the general public. But I digress. Let's move on here. In addition to all of this, Zegler also demanded that the scene should be at least cut short if they are not going to delete it, since she claimed it embarrassed her based on the editors choosing her worst takes out of the 10 that were filmed of the prince finally saving Snow White. Now, this was filmed mainly as a response from Disney to the backlash, after Zegler said that the prince won't save Snow White in the film, and Disney made a swift move to change all of that. This in turn is creating a ton of in-studio politics, and division, mind you, between different teams working on the Snow White movie, which is due for release on March 21st. Now, before I get to the big conclusion about this, is that we already know that Mark Webb and Greta Gerwig, they know what's coming. They know that this movie is going to taint their careers as writers and directors. There's no doubt about that. We also know that Rachel Zegler is facing a lot of issues with her acting career, because this is going to tank her career, especially after Y2K. I mean, that was a terrible movie. This is going to really be another terrible film, box office-wise and feedback-wise. We already know that the internal test screenings, the 7th one up to this date, have failed miserably, one after the other. There's no escape for Disney right now. This movie is going to be released in theaters. It's not going to go straight to streaming. It's going to be released in the actual theaters, and it's not going to stay out for long. I will guarantee you all that. This is going to stay out for maybe a couple of weeks' time, if it's going to fail that miserably, and then it's going to go right to Disney Plus, and hence that's going to lead to people abandoning ship on Disney Plus by unsubscribing. But moving onwards. Now, Rachel Zegler is also demanding Disney to also not do interviews with Andrew Burnap by her side, as she wants nothing to do with him during the press tour. So there you have it. There's another reason as to why Andrew Burnap is not doing a lot of interviews with Rachel Zegler, because she wants nothing to do with this guy. This is exactly why back in 2022 that she made those really odd jokes about Andrew Burnap's scenes maybe getting cut. It's Hollywood, baby. That popular line that she put out there in that interview. Well, it makes a lot of sense as to why she said that about Andrew Burnap. Now, what's interesting here is that throughout all the test screenings, throughout all of the setbacks related to Snow White, we know that this movie was supposed to be released a while back. We're talking about a very long time ago. It got delayed for well over a year. There were multiple reshoots, multiple re-edits to this movie. I think it's going to be an abomination by the Walt Disney Company, and it's really going to set back Bob Iger and his so-called legacy that he's trying to create before he steps down come 2026. But overall, I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.